My heart is beating so fast right now. Okay. The reason I'm so nervous making this video is because A, it's going to be the first video of my Somvaar Soch series. B, I do know what it is that triggered me to be so anxious right now, but this is a topic that has time and time again been brought up in conversations with my family, with my siblings, and like I've literally just had enough. Like I'm tired of myself. I'm tired and sick and tired of just saying like I'm gonna do something about it and I'm gonna make a video, and I'm like stuck in this I'm going to stage and then never actually doing it. So I'm just gonna do it. I don't care how the quality of the video comes out. I don't care if I sound like I'm not prepared. I'm just going to speak my mind openly. I do have a few notes, so if you find me looking at this side of my screen, it's because I do have my laptop open in front of me with some notes that I just quickly took. Before I begin, this video is based on my opinions. It's from my experiences, purely from my perspective. So if you do not agree with my opinion, there's a little red X either on the left side, top left, top right, depends if you're using a MacBook or a regular laptop, Windows laptop. Close the video. Don't continue to watch it, because the point of this video is not for me to change anyone's perspective. I'm not trying to make you feel bad that your perspective on things might be different than mine. You're your own human being. You're entitled to your own opinion. So that's not the point of my video at all whatsoever. I just want to open all of our minds just a little bit. Even if one person's watching this video and can take one thing away from it, I will be truly happy. And that's the whole point. My point is to just share knowledge with you from my perspective, and maybe you never looked at things from my perspective, and from hearing mine you'll be able to look at things differently. I'm just gonna jump right into it, and I'm gonna first start with some stereotypes about international students. Well, obviously from the title you can tell that I'm talking about international students and Canadians, and when I say Canadians I mean Canadian born. I guess we're first generation kids, so if you are the product of parents who immigrated to Canada at some point, they're rude, they're ill-mannered, they can't speak English, and if they do speak English, then they're trying too hard to be Western. They smell, they can't dress, they wear flip-flops. They're taking our jobs, they're trashing our country, they're engaging in violence, they're eating at the Gurdwara and misusing the whole service that the Gurdwara provides, and they consume drugs and drink too much, and they party. And that's just some of the stuff that I came up with, like from things I've heard from other people, things I've seen on the news, something that I've heard from international students themselves or from Canadians themselves. So I'm just gonna elaborate on a few of these points. I went to school with international students. I was in the project management program at Humber. Okay, so maybe I should start with this. I had no problem with international students. A lot of my friends during that time were international students, and I engage in the best conversations and I laugh the most when I'm surrounded by international students, because I feel like they give a whole different spin on things, and that's because they're going through a whole different journey in comparison to the journey that I'm currently on. I remember this one time I was in class and there was an international student and he's talking to me, and like I can speak Punjabi but obviously it's not that great, and I remember there was a guy in my class and he was speaking to me in English, and I remember another guy walked by who was supposedly one of his friends, and he was like, oh yaar tenu hawa lagi. And for those of you who don't know what that means, it means like you're so westernized, you're trying so hard to be something that you're not, or like, yeah, you got sucked into this whole Canadian mentality. I think it's so stupid. I think it's stupid enough that Indians hate on Indians. I think it's stupid enough that you have people like Basi out there who literally craps on international students, having such a big platform, having the ability to influence other people. But it's worse, so much worse, when an international student shits on another international student. I will never understand it. You know what this person's going through because you're going through the exact same thing. You know what it feels like to leave your family, leave your parents, your siblings, your friends, your whole life, your whole world behind, and literally pack your stuff and move to another country and start from scratch, where you have to learn to do the simplest thing, like how to order a French vanilla at Tim Hortons, to the most complicating thing, like paying bills or taking the bus. So you should be sympathetic towards fellow international students because they are on the same journey that you are on. And I was so taken back by this comment. I even said to him, you're living in a country where the first language that we speak is English. So if he's learning the language, be proud of him and help him and better him and not shit on him just because he's speaking the language that he should be speaking. All of the assignments that you do, all the presentations that you give, you have to speak English. And when you hit the real world, whether you're driving a truck, whether you're driving Uber, whether you're working at a franchise, whether you're working in an office, you're gonna need to know some sort of English. So would it really kill you to learn the language? And why is it bothering you so much that the other person is speaking English? I'll never understand that concept. Another thing I want to talk about is the fact that, and I hear this from like people in my family all the time. Why do international students wear flip-flops? I am born and raised in Canada, and I have worn flip-flops in the middle of winter with snow outside. And yeah, one time I did slip and fall, and yeah, it was funny and embarrassing, whatever. But like, why is it such a big deal that someone else is wearing flip-flops? How does someone's attire, what someone is wearing on their body or their feet or on their face or how their hair is styled have anything to do with you? Like, they're not forcing their flip-flops onto you and making you wear them. Why is it okay if a Canadian born is wearing the exact same thing? Why is it okay if a Canadian born is wearing ripped jeans and if international students wearing ripped jeans is a problem? I don't understand. The next thing I want to talk about is how they're taking our jobs. Okay. If someone is more qualified for a job than you are, and they happen to be an international student, they are not defined by their international student status, okay? So I'm not defined by the fact that I'm Canadian. I'm defined by my education. I'm defined by my previous work experience. I'm defined by my skill. If I were to go for a job, these are all the things that define me. Anything that you would pretty much put on your resume. So if I go through the interview process and an international student goes through the interview process and they get the job, it means that they were more qualified or better suited for the position than I was. So how is that their fault? For those of you who don't know and probably need to educate yourselves, international students or immigration in general betters our economy. People are coming here, spending money here. People who probably sell their land back home in India or spend all of their savings just to come here and pay like triple the tuition that we're paying in comparison to what we're paying. So that's not necessarily helping them. It's not doing them a favor. We're spending their money, emptying out their pockets, so obviously it's benefiting somebody, and that somebody is us. International students engaging in violence. So when I see on the news a bunch of international students, unfortunately you happen to be international students, holding a bunch of sticks in their hands, and they're fighting with, for whatever reason, and that's glorified. It's like in your face everywhere on the news. Plant a seed in your head to think that international students are violent. They are ruining and trashing our country. They're making Indians look bad. I want you to ask yourself, especially if you're a parent, you're telling me your kids have never fought? You're telling me your kids have never engaged in violence, whether it's physical, emotional, verbal, nothing? There is such a huge culture shock when international students come to Canada. The people that I find are talking shit about international students largely are immigrants themselves. And I'm talking about my parents' generation. So you came here as a refugee yourself, and you know that English was not your first language, and you know that you are the generation that has to struggle for the next 50 million generations to come. So you would think that you would be empathetic towards international students because you know their struggle. You know what it felt like to work on like $4 or $5 an hour in factories. You know what it felt like to drive taxis and trucks. And you know what it feels like to live in a 1-bedroom apartment and raise 3 kids because that's all you've ever known and that's the struggle that you see. You know what it feels like to want so badly to accomplish yourself and be successful. And you know what? A lot of us are. A lot of children who are products of immigrants' parents have parents that are successful. We live in mansions. We drive drive the nicest cars because our parents struggle. So international students are the same thing. They are that one generation that's going to struggle for the next 50 generations to come. So you would think that we would be understanding towards that concept, that we would be able to empathize for them, but we don't. Instead of lifting people up, we shit on them and we bring them down for absolutely no reason. How international students consume drugs and they drink and they party. Hello, Canadian born and raised do the same thing. The fact that you need to stereotype international students as doing that makes absolutely no sense to me. Moving along to stereotypes about Canadians. Canadians are spoiled, they live off their parents, they drive nice cars, they're paid for by their parents, they're so lucky, they have it so easy, and all they do is judge international students, and that parents of Canadians cannot accept international students, and Canadians don't know what struggle is. Everyone has their own struggles. Everyone goes through the journey of life differently. Not everything is handed to us on a silver platter. At least I can speak for myself. But to stereotype that all Canadians are living the life is not true. There's a lot of people out there that are in debt. There's a lot of mortgages that need to be paid. There are bills that need to be paid. There are cars that need to be paid. I see so many international students driving nice cars. An international student bought a car. He couldn't make the installments on the car and pay for the insurance at the same time. But that car is sitting in the driveway. He is continuing to make, I think it was like $1,000 or $1,200 a month, but he stopped his insurance. So literally that car, which has no investment value, it's not a house that will appreciate over time, it's literally a car losing value day by day as it sits there. It has no use. He cannot drive it, he cannot use it. It's literally like a showpiece sitting on his driveway. Why would you put yourself through that? Why would you do that to yourself? I don't know if it's an ego thing. I don't know if it's like, oh, the guy next to me has a nice car, whether that's another international student or that Canadian born has a nice car. I'm not sure what it is. Why not look to see what you are capable of and what is in your own pocket, okay? I'm not the richest person on this planet by no means. So why would I go buy like a $50 million house? It makes no sense. I'm going to look to see what I am capable of, what I can afford for myself, because it's my money, it's my installment, it's my insurance on the line. And it's as simple as that. Are we lucky that our parents struggled? Yes, we are. We are lucky. We're lucky. I'm so grateful to my parents that my dad came here, he settled here, he married my mom, and they worked their ass off to be where they are today. And they did it for us. They didn't do it for themselves. No one enjoys struggling. No one enjoys working 9 to 5, doing labor work in a factory. No one enjoys driving taxi, coming home to sleep for an hour or two, and then going back and driving taxi again. No one enjoys that. You do that for the next generation. You do that for the kids you don't even have yet. They're not even born yet. That's who you do that for. So am I grateful for it? Yes. Am I lucky? Yes. But is it my fault that I was born into a family that parents have already settled themselves? Am I going to be punished for that? The same way international students have no control over the country they were born in, same way Canadians have no control over the country they were born in. We have no control of the families we were born in. Parents of Canadians not accepting international students. So I'm gonna get personal here. The year I turned 25, or I was about to turn 25, I met someone. He was an international student, and this was the first guy that I actually liked and I had a connection with. My parents right off the bat were kind of like, no. And I know a lot of international students are probably watching this and they take offense to the fact that Canadian parents are not accepting of international students, and I can see why you take offense to that, and I completely understand where you're coming from, because like I just said, you're not defined by your international student status. But at the same time, I completely understand why my parents were so hesitant to begin with, and I can see why my parents didn't want me to date an international student. And even then, for 2 years, I dated him and I wanted to marry him, and I was willing to go through all the struggle. I was willing to live in a basement if that's what it took. I was willing to sell my Jeep if that's what it took. I was willing to work my ass off and build an empire with him if that's what it meant. The reason my parents were so hesitant is because they're thinking, honey, we struggled for you. And we don't want to see you struggle the same way. When I do have a child, I want the very best for that child. I want them to have the best of the best things. I want them to have the best education, the best life. I don't want to see them struggle. I don't want to see them sad. I don't want to see them suffer, because as a parent, that's what you want for your kids. So my parents wanted the same thing. They don't want to see me struggle by living in a basement and like have to think before spending money and have to worry about car payments or mortgages and like, oh, should I travel? But I can't travel because I don't have enough money sitting in the bank. And I know what a lot of people are thinking. A lot of you are probably thinking that money does not define a relationship. And you know what? For a long time, I believed that. I believed that money is not as important as love is. And you know what I learned from this relationship that I was in 2 years is that love is not enough. If you literally think love is enough to pay the bills and the mortgage and the car payments, you're kidding yourselves. I think true love and a true marriage is based on love, which is what your heart tells you, and logic, which is what your mind tells you. And I think that you need to have a good balance of both. So especially after my last and only relationship, my parents are not comfortable with me dating an international student. So even during that relationship, they were always very vocal about their opinions and their worries. And one of their worries was actually because a lot of international guys, and maybe some girls too, do use Canadian born and raised just to get their PR. And even if you're an international student watching this, you know of at least one person, or you've heard of at least one story where that was actually true, where someone did use a Canadian girl or a Canadian boy just to get their PR status. So it's not uncommon, it's not unheard of. Same reason my parents don't want me to marry out of my culture. I guess justification behind me not marrying in an international student. So the reason my parents want me to marry within my culture is because they believe that the more common things that you have, the more similarities you have, the easier it is for the relationship to work. Sometimes when you see people marrying out of culture, I find that I can accept someone else's culture and they can accept mine. I think the problem comes when you want to raise your kids. Which religious values or cultural values do you want to instill into your children? And sometimes if you have religious values that are so conflicting, it's hard to instill just one. And that's a long conversation you have to have, and something that you need to decide together. And maybe someone needs to compromise, or someone needs to sacrifice their belief altogether in order to make it work. The reason that my parents worried that I was dating an international student was because they didn't want to see me struggle the same way that they did. I just want to close off this video by saying that stereotyping is wrong. We can't group international students into this one big bunch and group Canadians into this one big bunch. I think that it's unfortunate that we define people based on their citizenship status. Instead of like shitting on one another, I think that we need to uplift one another. I wish I had the influence to make a bigger change. I mean, like, I have 80 subscribers, so how much of an influence can I really make? I don't know. I think that we need to treat people the way we want to be treated. We need to help people. I think we need to find our purpose and spread love instead of hate. And I think that we need to stop putting each other down and grouping people together, and we need to look at things from different perspectives. Makes sense. I think that if we just took the extra 3, 4, or 5 seconds to just look at someone and their struggle is not written on their face, what they're going through is not written on their face, you really have to talk to people to get to know that. And even talking to them, they have to open up to you. So I think that if we could just be a little bit more understanding that people have their own struggles, whether you're an international student, whether you're born and raised in Canada, is irrelevant. But if we just took those extra 5 minutes, just see from someone's perspective, I think that this world would be a much better place. I'm gonna end the video there. Honestly, this is what I wanted my channel to be this whole time. I'm done with sitting here waiting until 80 subscribers becomes 800 subscribers, which becomes 8,000, and so on and so forth. I'm not going to do that. So I'm gonna start putting out content that I want to put out. It's my channel, and I'm gonna talk about what I want to talk about. Like I said, if you don't like it, and if you didn't like it and you're still sitting there listening to me, then I'm not sure what you're doing, but I hope that you learned something. I think I learned something just by hearing myself talk about it. And like, you can tell my anxiety is so bad right now. My face is so red and it's so hot.